Believe it or not, those valuable breathing devices, although not as treasured as COVID-19 face veils, just get you somewhere in the range of 12 and 20 minutes of relaxing. Luckily, this is normally a huge enough length for your pilot to control the plane to a height at which the valuable oxygen isn't vital. The claimed oxygen doesn't really begin as this, yet is rather put away as a mixed drink of synthetic compounds and changed over to breathable gas. If you set out to step onto a plane without wearing a hazardous materials suit until kingdom come good karma, you daring soul. Despite the fact that pathogens are to be sure appalling, they are especially more averse to slaughter you than in a fire plane. Not to spread articulate frenzy, however, the Federal Aviation Administration commits that a plane can be cleared in 1 moment and 30 seconds. The explanation: this is the time it takes for fire to immerse and spread through an airplane lodge. To augment your odds, sitting inside 5 columns of an exit is the most strategical choice. Something else that can be left to your creative mind. It's not actually shroud and blade that dishes served on airplane are insipid, unappetizing, and for the most part the yuckiest thing known to man. What isn't standard is finding 1,500 nourishment infringement over a time of 4 years, as was experienced by the FDA between 2008 to 2012. The association examined various separate nourishment readiness offices, all of which supply aircrafts, finding the accompanying on various events: filthy utensils, mice, bugs, ants, defecation, mildew-covered items and unrefrigerated nourishment. Nourishment is being ambushed on more than one front. Nonetheless, researchers have now indicated that because of sensation transference, plastic cutlery makes nourishment taste more terrible. Another assault on nourishment in the sky happens as dampness. French culinary expert Raymond Oliver is credited with concocting "wetter is better" corresponding to plain nourishment, since saucy suppers unavoidably dry out to a lesser degree and taste better. At long last, assumed, newly arranged nourishment may have been cooked somewhere in the range of 12 and 72 hours before you expend it. In the event that the up-to-referenced confession on airplane microscopic organisms was not intense enough, think about this: the substances that you ingest on a plane, in particular water, may not be immaculate. A 2019 airline water study examined the nature of faucet water in both major and territorial U.S. carriers, and the scientists were in for an alarming end. They discovered shifting degrees of E. coli and coliform, the two of which are available in defecation, in the airplane's Adams brew. This water is provided through spigots in the kitchen and latrines, the water used to wash one's hands and make hot drinks, including espresso and tea. Out of nowhere, it's straightforward why many airline stewards purposefully don't partake in the delight of expending these brilliant refreshments. Umpteen airbound voyagers know about the awful situation: an abrupt open declaration, an infuriating scramble to attach safety belts and the topple of beverages to the floor. Air choppiness is as of now a disturbance, and it won't capitulate at any point in the near future. Researchers currently accept that extraordinary choppiness is because of increment by a few 100% in the gem-packed airspace over North America, Europe, and the North Pacific by the mid-century, when the measure of carbon dioxide in the climate is anticipated to be twofold its pre-modern fixation. The current assessed monetary expense of choppiness is $200 million each 365 days for United States aircrafts alone, and this is required to soar close by the developing degree of mid-air unrest. The incongruity of the quandary is hard to overlook. According to a paper distributed in the Environmental Science and Technology Diary, planes are multiple times more regrettable than vehicles per traveler mile as far as a 5-year warming effect, and so planes are making their own concern just by their very presence. Transoceanic flights have regularly been flown by 3 or 4 motor wide-body carriers. Aeronautics thinking directs that there is quality in numbers, however these multi-motor planes are getting wiped out and are supplanted by more eco-friendly 2-motor airplane. Present-day designing keeps motor disappointment from being an ordinary event, yet regardless of whether one were to come up short, the present planes can take off, fly and land with only one motor. Regardless of whether double disappointment happened, a plane can skim superbly without. For whatever length of time that air is disregarding its wings, the fowl will stay in flight, thus a plane with no drive will change its elevation for this to proceed. It can even stay noticeable all around for somewhere in the range of 20 and 30 minutes before arriving at the ground. Many know about the questionable and ostensibly notorious Hudson River arriving in New York in 2009, however, in spite of the fact that the possibility of flying with a solitary turbine or less is overwhelming, the fluffy little microorganisms living somewhere else in the plane are probably going to be unquestionably progressively savage. Fatigue at work is one of the most productive issues that can torment a few representatives, however, a plane cockpit isn't actually the perfect spot to get some shut-eye. An overview was directed by the European Cockpit Association in 2012, it included 6,000 pilots being evaluated for a weakness gauge. 3 out of 5 pilots in Sweden and Norway confessed to committing errors in their profession because of weakness, and in Germany this measurement was 4/5. Be that as it may, there were all the more disturbing figures included. More than 40% of British pilots admitted to visiting slumberland at the controls of a traveller fly. Much more radically, 1/3 of these confessed to awakening and finding their co-pilot likewise incapacitated. Despite the fact that pilots are allowed to catch some ZZZs while flying, in any event one pilot must be alert consistently. The outcomes were broad to such an extent that the ECA portrayed it as the most widely recognized, hazardous and under-announced marvel in Europe. Until COVID-19 showed up, that is, in spite of the fact that the under-revealed viewpoint doesn't actually move. Plane covers have a reputation that matches that of Al Capone. An inquiry by the Wall Street Journal's unit of analytical writers found that most of these polyester wools are washed only once every 5 to 30 days. On this, they are reused between washes for a large number of individual travelers. One fortunate traveler will be lucky enough to get the cover on the otherworldly day that it is washed down, however each from there on will be exposed to expanding episodes of frightfulness. Government law necessitates that these measly blankets are treated with a compound fire-resistant, yet this is the single prerequisite for the business. A great many people view cellophane-wrapped covers as being perfect, yet lab testing of fixed covers has indicated yeast, shape, and other microbes. Clothing representatives for one carrier have likewise expressed that lone 20% of covers, ones with particular stains, are washed. What's more awful, a few aircrafts are charging their travelers for covers. That the area individuals go to alleviate themselves isn't the dirtiest spot on a plane is clearly a disturbing measurement. A recent report by Travel Math found that albeit flush handles had 265 microscopic organisms province shaping units, CFU, per square inch, there were 2 other awful areas with significantly more pathogens. Seat back plate were the most joyfully microorganisms colonized places on the airplanes, with 2,155 CFU per square inch. That is an educational multiple times higher than flush handles. This is likely a direct result of cleaning impediments. Between flight staff have the chance to evacuate trash, however not to play out an increasingly exhaustive sanitization. Disgustingly, an Auburn University study found that microscopic organisms right now for longer than some other at 7 days. Overhead vents were additionally not exactly sterile, at 285 CFU, while safety belt clasps and headrests likewise raised warnings. With somewhere in the range of 150 and 350 individuals installed each flight, the potential for germ spreading is practically interminable and shocking. Each plane accident is one of a kind, and the most secure seat is difficult to ascertain until the disaster area really happens. The most invaluable position will be subject to the sort of mishap it changes if the fly capitulates to a crash, rolls, or land on water. Be that as it may, estimations have been made on the most secure spot to be. In 2012, a gathering of specialists utilized an uncrewed Boeing 747 packed with crash fakers and slammed it in an endeavored crisis arriving into the Mexican desert. The front of the plane was found to admission the most inadequately. The cockpit was disfigured, a few seats were flung several feet, and due to the sheer decimation, live travelers would have likely been truly harmed or murdered. These discoveries are upheld by a 2015 examination by Times Magazine of the Federal Aviation Administration's CSRTG aircraft accident database. They found that the center seats close to the back of the plane had the most reduced casualty rates, at 28%. This is in contrast with a pace of 44% in passageway situates in the plane. At last, one's lifetime possibility of being in a plane accident is 1 of every 1,800, in contrast with 1 out of 112 out of a vehicle, so these insights may simply be gripping at straws. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.